Hello, testing. Good. Okay. Hola, ¿cómo estamos? I'm Elia, and welcome to the fourth episode of Hable con Elia. This is a new video podcast in which I invite members of the artistic community from around the globe with the objective of having an open dialogue and getting to know more about their art, life, and mindset. You can also listen to us live via Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube every Saturday. And if you can't make it to the live broadcast, just know that you can listen to the recording on all imaginable streaming platforms. I have the great pleasure to introduce to you all my great dear friend, multi-instrumentalist, bandmate extraordinaire, Joel Azose. Amigo, so great to have you here. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Oh, I'm always excited to have a conversation with Joel.
It's good to see you.
Great to see you too.
Yeah.
How's everything going?
Everything's going good. I was telling you earlier that I just got back from the library. I got stuff I'm
Right.
very excited for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any new books?
Uh
Anything that
yeah, I got the book that I got was about the design of novel art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Book jackets and all this stuff. So it's got designs from across the decades and all this stuff. It's big sort of coffee table kind of book.
Nice.
And then I picked up a movie called Vitalina Varela that's one of the Oscar contenders for foreign film this year.
Oh wow. What where from?
I think it's out of Brazil.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I know that you're big, especially French movies, I think is your
Oh, yeah.
specialty, right?
Yeah, you bet.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I watched a French movie last night.
Nice.
Callie and I watched Cachet, which is
Oh, nice.
Michael
That's
Haneke.
awesome.
Have you seen Cachet?
No, I have not.
Do you know about it?
I would have to look into see
Yeah.
if I maybe watched the trailer and maybe that
It's
I might recall.
it's very
But
creepy. It's like a very
really,
tense movie. Yeah.
yeah. Is it a contemporary French movie?
Yeah, it was 2005.
Okay.
So it's pretty recent. I mean, pretty recent.
Nice.
That's like fully, 15 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And big hi to Callie if she's listening.
Yeah.
Or she watches this later on.
Yeah.
Hope she's doing well. So let's dive into that a little bit. I've always been very curious about. I know that you've always had this passion for film, for movies, but particularly French cinema. When did that start? Was there a specific movie that you had watched growing up that caught your attention? Because I know that that's kind of like that is kind of like your specialty. You do know quite a lot about French
Yeah.
cinema.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling was so I explored Yeah, you can see Callie in chat. Cachet is messed up. That's true. Um
Nice.
yeah, I mean, I was sort of adventurous even in high school with movie watching, but it didn't start as much in earnest until when I was in college. Because the University of Washington had this enormous film library, and no one ever put holds on any of them. So I could just sort of stroll into the library and
Mhm.
grab a movie from France from a director who I'd heard of but didn't know anything about, a movie from Germany, a Richard Linklater movie. So I remember watching Psycho, obviously not global cinema, but like
Sure.
to an 18 or 19-year-old kid, watching Psycho for the first time was a pretty energizing experience.
To say
Uh
the least.
yeah, right? I don't know. So I
Yeah,
think for me,
yeah.
my feeling is just that there is this whole world of culture out there, and
Mhm.
film is such a beautiful, accessible way
Yeah,
to like kind of eat it up 2 hours at a time.
yeah. You said it so beautifully. That's exactly right. I think that's the beauty of art in general, but especially cinema,
Yeah.
where you can really appreciate and have a more realistic grasp on a foreign culture, or a different society that might not be your own, and there's something very particular about also the history behind cinema, and I know that French cinema had its golden age as well, and has gone through a lot of different stages. Always very experimental. I think even
Yeah.
to this day, there's a lot of experimental contemporary French cinema that's very eye opening. It's very avant garde. It's very disturbing. It's very just raw.
Yeah.
anything that has grasped your attention from any recent movies that have been made?
Recent movies. Okay, well, let's put a pin in that because as we're talking about France specifically, um, I think one of the things that I really love about that particular era, right, like 1960s sort of new wave French film,
Mhm.
um, explores a lot structurally. You're absolutely right in terms of like all of this cool experimentation. But for me, there is a sense that is present in a lot of it, like Jacques Demy's movies and Agnes
Mhm.
Varda's movies. And there is a sense of romance and a sense of longing and yearning. And like stereotypically, you think of Paris, and they're all skinny and
Right.
smoking and berets and all this stuff. And
Right.
but there is something so extremely romantic about the experience of longing and the way that is expressed
Mm.
through that era in movies. In terms of stuff that I've watched recently that has really energized me, I just watched Minari.
Oh,
Have you heard of Minari?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's this story of Korean immigrants to
Mhm.
America
Mhm.
and trying to sort of make their way in farming. And it's so that was really touching, really moving.
Mhm.
Um, Similarly, actually, in scored by the same guy, I watched The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is from 2
Okay.
years ago,
Yes,
something
that's
like that.
right.
That one
Which
was
which was also a contender during the Oscars, right? If I'm not
it
mistaken.
actually it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't.
It
It
didn't
didn't get
get
any. Oh, wow, that's
it
surprising.
didn't even get nominations,
That's so yeah,
which
that
is just
doesn't
not
make any
fair.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Have
And more importantly, I think also because of the not just the movie, but the history behind the theme that it was influenced by, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right, these are like, it was so timely.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have living in Seattle that's dealing with similar stuff to San Francisco.
Right.
Have you
Right.
seen stuff? I mean, because I know you're also a movie guy.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I think when I lived closer to my older brother, Javier, who's a filmmaker, he's always introduced me to French movies, very abstract French movies.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember. There was one that we did watch last time I was in Ecuador a couple of years ago, and it was just very. It was just all over the place, but it was very fascinating at the same time. It was the same actor from I forget this movie. Um, the movie about the guy that has the car accident, or no, has like a brain aneurysm, and then um, he's stuck in a coma, but he narrates everything that's happening, like he's
Oh.
alive, but
Uh-huh.
he I forget the name of the movie. I should look it up. I'm really really terrible with names, but um, I do recall there was a time where I lived in Ecuador where I would be watching, just because my parents are also into a lot of they're really into European cinema, and we always had like the latest or a lot of just movies that are from France or Italy and so forth,
Yeah.
always playing. And but I do recall that, yeah, especially contemporary French cinema, the one that I've that I watched growing up was always very very disturbing in a way. But I think I would say I uh, probably growing up with like Cinema Paradiso.
Mhm.
Ennio Morricone was always like an important presence in my life growing up. There was always his music being played,
Yeah.
and I think I relate more with that type of movie. It's one of the few movies that I can watch just like over and over, and I never get tired of it. And the story behind it, obviously, and but the music and just uh, the time, and the setting, but also a lot of the things that you were mentioning about European culture.
Mm.
Um, the romanticism and the sensitivity, and there's just a lot of things that's like you mentioned, what you get out of watching European film, or just movies from other parts of the world.
Did
um,
Ennio Morricone, did he score Cinema Paradiso?
I believe so, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Man.
yeah, which is an amazing score. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he did it, like
Yeah.
his score for The Thing and his score for The
Hmm.
Hateful Eight
Hmm.
and all of these like the spaghetti westerns that he did. Yeah.
And then there's also there's another aspect. I've always loved, graphic novels and comic strips, and Mobius, was a renowned, very famous French illustrator, and so that's another aspect that uh, I was very influenced by, but influenced in the sense that I just really uh, love all the science fiction based graphic novels that were created during that era. And then these worlds that were just created by the eye of Mobius, who was French.
Is he contemporary? Is he still creating? I don't
No,
know anything about this.
he passed away a couple years ago.
Hmm.
So he was more like active during I would say the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Do you have
But
anywhere in particular to start with him? I mean, as somebody who doesn't know anything about.
no, not really. I mean, it's one of those things where I just I know that he had some influence with the designs for like Halo at one point, the first Halo games too.
Wow.
Um, Especially like like the whole design of the armor and the characters and the worlds. Like his big thing was just creating these very abstract alien worlds, and you just had to look at the art that he would create and you would just be taken there automatically. um and But there was also an important scene in France during the 70s when he was very active, where I would say like I think it was like more like early 70s, um, where there was a magazine for illustration that he was very active in, and it was a whole movement. And from that came so many other things. I know that he also participated in the making of the Fifth Element with creating a lot of the characters and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think he's an important, a very important and distinguished artist for not just the graphic novel world, but also movies that became very popular during the 90s, and video games, like I said.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's been a while since I've like looked into that, so I'm not very fresh with remembering exact dates and other things. But just fascinating to know how not just the cinema but art and other things have been so important in France during that time.
Yeah.
But going back to the reason I thought it was important to also talk about your passion for French cinema is because I know that you've used also some photography to display for some artwork for singles and
Yeah.
music that you've released, and I know that that's something you've been very particular about, and it's almost like a trademark of yours. You tend to use these
Hmm.
black and white imagery from movies, from French movies, if I'm not mistaken. So tell me a little bit more about that interest you have, obviously with the movies, but then using that with your music and uh, the
Yeah.
association of those two things or those two worlds.
I don't know. For me, when I think about coming up with the art that I want to use for my music, it's really just about what are images that I find interesting.
Yeah.
And usually that is like what is um I want to find images that are like uh imbued with some sort of emotion, some
Hmm.
sort of energy, right? You're trying to capture some energy because somebody looks at a piece of art that is representing your music.
Right.
Right, there is the adage, like, "Don't judge a book by its cover," but, like, people kind of have to do that because a song takes 4 minutes, an
Hmm.
album takes an hour. Like, you
Right.
need people to have a sense of what they're getting into.
Right.
Um, but for me, honestly, it's not that heavy. I look at, like, the French and Italian movies of the 1960s, and I just like that style. It's not something that I see a lot of people out here doing.
Hmm.
Um and it has a very sort of classic, timeless feel to me,
Yeah.
which is kind of what I'm trying to evoke.
Right.
You know, I say that trying to evoke, but like the last release that I did was 2 years ago.
Right.
But yeah, that's why I go for that.
And music, what was, because I know that you started off playing the horn. Was it the French horn or? Was it the
Oh, yeah, I mean, I started
baritone
off playing
horn?
I started off playing the baritone horn and the trombone.
Right, that's what I remember.
Yeah.
And when did you start picking up the guitar,
It was my
growing up?
freshman year of high
Your
school.
freshman year of high school?
Because I was always, like,
Sure.
singing was always my passion.
Right.
That was like I
Singer.
always loved to sing. Yeah, right, I mean, we've talked about this before where you wanted to become a drummer,
That's right. Yeah.
and your dad, as I recall, said you couldn't be a singing drummer,
Right.
and so, of
Exactly.
course, you picked up the guitar. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. It was very natural, yeah.
I wanted to be able to accompany myself.
Right. Makes sense. And there's a lot of music in your family too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Um, I think, my brothers are sort of more casually musically talented. I
Right.
mean, uh my little brother is just a phenomenal piano player. Like, he is able to play this jazz piano in a way that, like, he's never trained at it, but we always had
Mhm.
a piano in our living room, and so he and I would sit together for a long time. Like, I would be on the left, I was playing the bass parts, and he was playing the treble parts, and the two of us would play a song that was really meant for one person. But he's incredibly talented, and he plays saxophone and all this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was it just because when you were growing up, you want to be part of the band or, your school band, or was there another influence behind that, especially with brass instruments? Because
Well, I
that's
was
also something. I mean, I know that it's easier to pick up on piano or the guitar, but going to brass, I think that there has to be some prior influence um, or there was like a prior relationship that somebody had within your family with brass instruments and and jazz or whatever the
Well,
case may
yeah,
be.
I'm the third of 4 kids,
That's
and so I looked up to both of my older brothers. I Past tense and present tense.
right.
Um, and it was something that I saw them doing. So
Hmm.
as soon as I got a chance when I was in 5th grade, I jumped at it. It was like no consideration for me. I said
Nice.
this was something that, like, was super cool, and it was this big communal activity for them at the high school, right?
Right.
They would play at the football games, and they would wear their uniforms, and it just seemed like, everything that is fun and exciting and enlivening and joyous about communal, like, music making. They
Right.
were there, and
Right.
so when I got the chance, I wanted to do that. Originally, I wanted to play the clarinet, but I, like, tried it once, and I was like, "This is not for me," so I went to trombone.
Right. And so freshman year of high school,
Yeah.
did you were you introduced to a specific rock band, or because changing to the guitar typically is an indication that there's something else rather than the traditional stuff. Was there? I know that you're just like me. We're big fans of the Strokes, but
Yeah.
what were some of the first bands that you saw that you idolized and you were like, I want to do something like
Oh,
that?
man. Like, they're out now, right? But, brand new. I mean, because you gotta remember, okay, so for me, ninth grade was 2003,
Hmm.
right? We're not that far apart in age. How old were you in ninth grade? I mean, what year was it?
I graduated in 2004, so I
Okay.
was I was starting 12th grade,
Yeah.
2003. Yeah,
Okay. So, right, I mean, it was this era of pop punk bands and kind of emo bands. I mean, it was Yellow Card, it was My Chemical Romance, it was Brand New,
yeah,
all this stuff.
that's right.
So, and a lot of them didn't land for me, but there was something
Yeah,
about I remember learning the, like, more sensitive songs by and Death Cab. Oh, Death Cab was huge.
yeah.
It was for me, like, in high school, Death Cab, Bright Eyes. I remember finger picking Iron and Wine.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, it just well, honestly, though, I loved Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I'm
Hmm.
not gonna pretend that I didn't. Um,
That's fine. They're a great band.
that was so they were one of them that, like, I don't play anything like them now, and I never did.
Hmm.
But that was one of my big inspirations to picking up a guitar.
Nice.
Well, what was your inspiration? I mean, how old were you when you started playing music?
I started playing the piano when I was very young. I think probably maybe like 4 or 5, and I took piano lessons, and it was a pretty active and important instrument because we had a piano at home, a classic piano. And then we moved to the States, and in elementary school, we had the orchestra band. You know, learning an instrument was part of the extracurricular activity.
Yeah.
And I've always been very musical, and I grew up. My dad is a huge, music lover and expert in all classical music. Uh, and with my two older brothers, I grew up listening to a lot of 80s rock. And I think that's really where my influence started. I mean, I grew up listening to U2, Tears for Fears, The Cure, Talk Talk, like the big 80s alternative pop, and later, obviously, a little bit of Phil Collins and other acts. But when I moved to the States, like I was mentioning, I decided to learn I don't know if I decided, I guess I was just put into a situation where I decided to pick up on the violin.
Really?
And so I played the violin for about 4 years, from fourth grade to or from fifth grade to eighth grade. But I was really bad. I didn't practice. I really didn't care for it. And I was actually, in fact, so lousy at playing the violin that I remember that our middle school orchestra director, who was really awesome, and she was actually my teacher too, and she recognized that I was just so bad at it that she didn't want my noise to be affecting the rest of the group. And so I was in the second violins, but I was in the back of the second violins. Like I was like, he's there, but he's not there.
They like put you in another
he's there,
room.
but we won't hear him.
You were playing from down the hall.
Yeah, I was playing from down the hall.
You were playing from the storage closet in the next wing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it just wasn't for me. I mean, I don't know. I guess in a way, yeah, it was important to stick with something for 4 years, but I wasn't really evolving. And then I had a good friend of mine, or one of my earliest friends, childhood friends, John Sood, who's actually a musician still, and he does a lot of work out in New York City. He's working more with theater, I think, nowadays, but he was playing cello at the time, and he also kind of quit, although he was very good at playing cello. And I just started seeing him pick up on the guitar, and I was like, oh, what's that? Like, I want to play the guitar. And I remember, in fact, he came with me to buy my first electric guitar, which was also my first guitar.
Yeah.
I bought the Fender Squier set that would come with like the amp.
Dude, I got the exact same one.
And I still have it to this day. Like, my guitar is my Squier that's just been modified over the years, and I've improved the guitar a bit more. But so I picked up on the electric guitar, and then kind of the rest is history. But I would definitely say that my voice has always been my main instrument, because I did a lot of chorus growing up, and did a little bit of theater, but singing was always kind of like you, probably the more important instrument. And I don't think I consider myself like, like a. I think I consider myself more of a singer before a musician, because I think that's what comes more naturally to me. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it started. But I was definitely at some point introduced again with my brother Jorge during a trip to Germany when I was doing some university studies there. He found out about Joy Division, and he found about Ian Curtis and the whole post-punk movement. And I remember the email he sent me. He's like, if you have a chance to go to, a local music store, try to find Unknown Pleasures, try to find Closer. These are the two albums from Joy Division. Suspend about, he told me about Ian Curtis, and I was just so wowed by the story, that he committed suicide, but he left his music, and that really was the start of a new era for me. I think it kind of already, at the time, I was already listening to a lot of what is now known as the post-punk revival act, with the New York City scene, with the Strokes and Interpol and
right.
all
All these
so many.
these driving straight,
Yeah,
4/4, not a lot of syncopation. Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And then it was that, and then learning more about the history of why these acts happen is like, oh, so it was like a puzzle, and I was able to put the pieces together
Yeah,
and recognize that there wouldn't have been any Interpol or anything like that without anything came before that. And so that's
yeah,
when I really discovered post punk, and I was like, that's my jam, that's my thing. And the
yeah,
rest is history. But yeah, it's interesting. But in your case,
yeah,
what would you say was was there? I know that you were big on the like the post revival acts
yeah.
as well, but was there anything that, like, for me, watching Interpol on MTV? Like, I just happened to be watching Slow Hands when they actually used to put music videos on MTV,
Yeah, those were the days.
and I remember watching it, and I was like, "What? That sound is amazing!" Like, I could just feel all the goosebumps, on my arms, and I was just so drawn by the music, and I just loved it. I was like, "This is it! This is the music that I love." Was there something similar that happened to you musically? Like, was there a specific act or band or artist that you saw that you were like, this is amazing?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, it was like that was my everyday. I remember Channel 98, I think, for
Okay,
on the television set that we used to get.
sure.
Channel 98 was the box, and the box played music videos 24/7. And I was in heaven. The number of times that I heard "So Fresh and So Clean" by Outkast was just outrageous. They loved playing that one. I loved listening to it. And then eventually 98 became Univision, 99 became the Canadian
Did
channel.
you start watching some Latin American
Yeah,
music?
I was watching Sábado Gigante, and I was
No,
watching
that's terrible.
I was watching, no, so I mean, but, like, I was living in and out with that. I think if I had to point to, like, the the act that sort of put me where I was going,
Mhm.
it's gonna sound a little bit silly, but it was probably OK Go. It was like
Okay,
I
yeah.
was in high school, and I think the first concert that I ever went to was Motion City Soundtrack, Plain White Tees, right, with "Hey There, Delilah." Who
Uh-huh.
didn't learn to finger pick "Hey There,
Oh my
Delilah,"
gosh,
right?
everybody
Like,
did.
I was a white boy with an acoustic guitar. It was the first thing that I
Of
learned.
course.
So Motion
I think we're having some technical difficulties here. Hopefully we can come back. There we go. We lost you there.
Yeah. Right, so the Spill Canvas who have been lost to the sands of time, but OK Go. There was so, like, the bubbly, fizzy sort of guitar pop music that they were making at that time,
Mhm.
and this was, like, the Treadmill video had come out, but it hadn't blown up, and I remember seeing
Right.
them in that concert and just like, actually, to this day, like, in my dresser, I have an OK Go T-shirt that is signed by
Mhm.
the band from that show. But I remember that was kinda my jumping off point, was, like,
Nice.
I went from there to Maximo Park, and
Right.
just like you said, The
Which we also
Strokes.
share that I mean, we went
I
to the
know.
show. Did we go to the show together?
I don't think we saw Maximo Park together.
Did you go to the show that they had in Seattle a couple years ago? Were you there?
They were at the Crocodile? I don't think I was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, okay, okay. Because I actually got to meet, the singer,
No!
and I have a photo
Man.
with him. But I remember that when we met the first time,
Yeah.
well, eventually we found out about that we liked Maximo Park, and I think we liked a lot of the bands from that era.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different British bands that,
The Libertines never got me,
yeah, the Libertines
but,
never
like
got me either,
but the
but
Future
the
Heads
Future Heads, exactly, that's the other
and
one.
the Kooks,
The Kooks,
the Zootons.
We Are
I'm gonna put in
Scientists, I think,
We
was
Are
another one.
Scientists
Yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it was Franz Ferdinand, right?
Franz
How can you
Ferdinand, of
not do
course.
I
Block
remember
Party, yeah.
oh, man. So,
Such a good era.
what's funny to me is I remember hearing Marquee Moon by Television for the first
Mhm.
time, and I put on See No Evil, and it's like, "This sounds like Franz Ferdinand." Scouting for Girls I never listened to. It was a name that I heard, but I never checked that one out, and I will genuinely go and look at it after this. But like,
Hey, Charlie.
I
Good to
I
see you.
remember hearing Marquee Moon, and being like, this just sounds like something off of Franz Ferdinand's
Right.
debut, and feeling astounded that
Yeah.
music from the 1970s
Mm-hmm.
and music from the 2000s were just kind of part and parcel.
Yeah. I remember I was living in Rome at the time. I had the fortune to live there and graduate high school in Rome, Italy, and I would buy the Enemy magazine like every month, and that's how I was informing myself about all these bands because they were really covering them a lot at that time. And they would always release they would provide these like limited edition, CDs with the magazine with like unedited demos and stuff like that. That era was like really really big for me too. Oh no. Oh well, this happens. There's nothing we can do about it. Technology. I think we lost you again.
Yeah, you did. Right, you were talking about the discs in the NME.
Yeah, the discs and Enemy and just the magazine in general. Just that's how I was getting to know more about these bands that I was looking up to. Oh my gosh, there's so many bands. There was also Kasabian. Kasabian was awesome.
Oh,
That was a
Kasabian.
great band.
Is it well, so like take a second and think about music discovery now, right?
Yeah.
And compare it to what it was like then. And even just like the amount of energy that I was dedicating to finding new bands. I couldn't even tell you how I found all these bands. Like Hard Fi,
Mhm.
like
Oh my
it,
gosh, Hard Fight.
but it was the same thing in
Remember
college.
that
I
band.
think, but those were kind of that was the heyday of the music blog.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of blogs. Yeah, that's for sure.
And to that end, right, like you go online and you can steal an MP3 of like some nobody band's
Yeah,
single. I was using right, you had Pandora, but you didn't have Spotify. It feels different to me. How do you deal with music discovery now?
that's a great question. I've been very bad at that, just
Yeah,
because I tend to listen to the same thing over and over again, and I also tend to go back to listening to things that I listened to a long time ago. I'm having like a Radiohead um,
sure.
vibe again, which I listen to, and I listen to work. Like it just helps me
Mhm.
um, concentrate. So I've been listening. I've actually been listening and not watching as much, but listening to the basement, uh, s- um, the live basement session in Rainbow session that Radiohead played a couple years ago. That I think went or was available or became public for viewing just a couple months ago on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Didn't
But
they also that's the one where they cover the headmaster ritual?
I have no idea.
Because I'm
You're better
sure
at that. You're better at names than I am.
well,
I'm
I mean
sure they
they
do play a couple songs that are not part of In Rainbows. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay, because I know they do a Smiths cover of the headmaster ritual, and I think that's where it is.
yeah. Charlie says that I trust a lot of Spotify's Discover Weekly.
Yeah.
It gets me to the spot most of the time. The release radar is not that good though.
It yeah,
Yeah, I
forgive
would
me for
say.
saying
Oh
so.
no, go for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
forgive me for saying so. Like Chuck Klosterman, say what you will, again, like as a 31-year-old white guy, I have to give a disclaimer that yeah, I've read Chuck Klosterman, but he says like that your music taste really ossifies by the time that you're basically in your mid 20s, right? At that point, you have discovered all of the bands that are going to be really meaningful to you.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to find something that is going to stick with you like the music of your teenage and early 20s.
Yeah, that's very true. I
Yeah.
think that's very true. Although, see, for me, it's also about I've discovered so much music in the past couple years like important music to me that it has actually transcended and influenced me
Yeah.
just by going to a record store. I haven't been able to do that in over a year, of course,
Yeah.
but like I've discovered so many bands that I didn't know existed because I visited record stores. And I think for example, I had no idea about Built to Spill until I went
Oh, sure.
to Easy Street Records on West Seattle,
Yeah.
and they happened to be playing, like their album, and I fell in love, and I was like, what? Why have I thought it was like a Death Cab for Cutie act, or that
Yeah.
sounded like them. And then I think at the time, Atticus, who also is a DJ on KXP now, I think I asked him, hey, like, what's this band? I feel very ashamed for asking if it's something that's already known.
Right.
And he was like, no worries. Like, this is built for Built to Spill. And I basically ended up purchasing the vinyl that it was a re-release of compilation of all their singles.
Sure.
And then I discovered probably one of the most important influences for my upcoming record this year was Prefab Sprout. I
Oh,
didn't know it
yeah.
existed. And I think I told you about this. I was in LA in a very small record store. It's a very narrow store. It's just a hall, and they
Yeah.
have, CDs and records and everything. It's in close to Glendale. I forget exactly the name. And I would go there on a regular basis. And I happened to be there one day. This was a couple of years ago when I was living in LA, and I heard this song and I was like, oh, this catchy, it's pretty good. And then they heard the next song and I was like, oh my gosh, this is pretty good. And then the third song, I was like, this is great. This sounds amazing. Like, I need to know what this is.
Yeah.
And I found out it was a prefab. So they were playing what I own now. It's probably the most expensive CD I've ever purchased in my life. It was like $20, which I was more than happy to purchase. It's a 2 CD compilation of all their hits, basically.
Yeah.
From the 80s and 90s, Prefab Sprout. And that's really the record that influenced me significantly for this new upcoming record that I'm releasing. And also, I don't know if this happens to you, but to kind of like take this back to you, is
Yeah.
for me, music is, of course, we all have a personal connection to music, but for me, I definitely have. There's a sense of chronological importance that's assigned to music,
Yeah.
and so I listen to a record for such a long time that then I full stop, and I don't listen to that record for another couple months or years.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this is that I can always go back to that record, and when I listen to it, it takes me back to where I was
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, in that time. Do you have a special, like, is there a special connection that you have with music or with albums or with record or just listening to things
Man.
similar to
Yeah.
that?
I put on Hail to the Thief, and I can swear that I am in 10th grade I'm sitting at, my like childhood home kitchen table doing my math homework. I remember where I was when I sat down and listened to that record for the first time. For me, there's a Bell and Sebastian record that when I put it on, I
You're big
find
into Bell and Sebastian. Yeah,
I
I know
love
that.
Bell and
Yeah.
Sebastian. They just tug at my heartstrings. I put on
Yeah.
Bell and Sebastian, and I am walking across Red Square at the University of Washington.
Wow.
Um, like for me, when I was younger, when I was in middle school, I really loved
Mhm.
listening to Jamiroquai,
Me
uh,
too.
who I think, in all fairness, culture has given them not a fair shake.
Mhm.
Uh, so I'm hopeful that there is a critical reevaluation of Jamiroquai as good. Uh, that takes me back.
Yeah.
Um,
We have a
yeah.
visitor.
Who've we
Well,
got?
Mila, but
I was
I think
hoping it was Mila. Well, okay. I was gonna ask you a question actually, because you were talking about Prefab Sprout. The way you get hooked in is
Uh-huh.
the singles collection. I want to ask you as an artist, right? Elia Ezker, you get a couple of albums in. Would you ever release a greatest hits compilation?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's I see nothing wrong in um the value that you put in music. I mean, ultimately, I think music is also so personal. It's funny because I've been with this project for a decade now, and the what I take with me is just like whatever few people that I've listened to my music and have felt something, like that's really that all that matters to me.
Sure.
And I just released my second single for this upcoming record on Thursday, and I got just people that I've never, first time that I hear from them. I not necessarily like typically your friends and your family who are
Yeah.
always my biggest supporters, without a doubt. But when you hear from someone who you've never engaged with, who's in Mexico or in Peru or somewhere
Yeah.
else, and they're like, "Hey, I really love this new single." I'm perplexed by that. I don't even know how to respond. I got a message from someone asking me if I have a vinyl version of Futuro Mano, which is my first
Yeah.
full length album, and I'm like, dude, I wish I had one.
Well,
And
do you know
so,
about yeah, I mean, have we talked about the Bandcamp vinyl pressing service?
no, that's awesome.
You could probably make that happen in all seriousness. So vinyl sales, I want to talk to you about this too. Vinyl sales rose 30%
That's
in
amazing.
2020. Can you believe that?
That's a novelty that I actually fully support and I appreciate. I have
Yeah.
no problem with that. People like buying vinyls, and that helps true artists that
Yeah.
really their livelihood is dependent on that. I'm all for that. I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful. I think the whole vinyl, this whole like rebirth of the vinyl has been really. I still have no idea how a vinyl is made and how sound is created from a vinyl. I find it to be so fascinating.
Isn't it magical?
It's so magical,
Yeah.
and it's just a more robust sound. There's something about it that it's very it's like, I don't know, very very pure, I
Mm.
think is the right word. But you're saying about the
Yeah.
Bandcamp now has a
Right.
so you
So,
have the option to
yeah,
release through
you
them,
have
or how does that work?
you have the option. You basically do a pre-order system with them, right? You put up a release and you say, I want to get vinyl pressed of such and such release, and
Okay.
they will do it if you meet a certain like pre-order threshold.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a crowdfunding thing. It's sort of
Oh,
a
that's awesome.
like, and it only goes through if the funding goal has been met. But it's incredible because they take out the need for vinyl distribution, vinyl creation, finding somebody to actually press it, finding somebody to package it, all this stuff.
Right.
You give them the design, and they basically take care of the rest, which
That's awesome.
I think like is going to make it so accessible to so many indie artists who are now just trying to press a 7-inch, a 12-inch,
Yes.
like to do that kind of thing in a small batch.
Yeah, especially now because, with touring out of the question, a lot
Right.
of bands and artists have to be selling merch. And also not just that, but Bandcamp has been very crucial in, with their whole campaign to uh, give all 100% uh, sales directly to the artist on specific Fridays of the month. I think it's the
Yeah.
first Friday of every month, and the fact that they've kept that going since last year has been really awesome. I think a lot of people undervalue that,
Yeah.
and I think that a lot of artists undervalue that, and actually have been able to sell a lot of their music that way,
Yeah.
and has been an immense way to support artists across the globe. Really,
Yeah.
um,
I've certainly bought a couple of releases on
same
Bandcamp
here.
Fridays. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's nice also going through looking at what's trending. I mean, they have a phenomenal curation to
they
like
do.
the Bandcamp blog. If right for me, even if I want to stay in my lane and just look at like surf pop, they say like, "Oh,
Right.
here are surf pop
That is
bands
right.
from around the world that you might want to know." And
Right.
it's like, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll throw a couple of bucks to each of them and just see what's up."
It's so I love these like these genre names. I was talking with my friend Greg Franklin from Firecrackers, the Royal Firecrackers, who's the second guest for my podcast, and he was mentioning about yacht
Yeah.
rock.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I didn't know that existed, and I was like, that's my jam.
That's your jam. You wanna be out here listening to Michael McDonald out on your
There
yacht.
you go. If I had a yacht, I would.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Look, when you get Futo Mano pressed on vinyl, I'm in. I'm definitely a
You're
pre-order
too
for that
kind.
one.
I
Come
will
on.
give it to you for free.
I will buy one just to
You
shoot
you
your
actually
number.
are in the album too, so it's not like you recorded the bass line for Futuro Mano.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't I just play
That's
bass
awesome.
on that record?
Yeah, exactly. You should give
Yeah.
me a free free copy. I was in it, which is also really cool. I wanted to talk about that a little bit for whoever's here and listening. Um, Charlie says that he wants one too.
Yeah, we'll
I
say one
will
for
send
Charlie.
one to you, my friend. Um, I I remember when we met at a company called White Pages Pro here in Seattle, and I joined. I think it was December 2015, if I'm not mistaken, and I think it was like the first month or something, and I was just right where like the lobby area I was having lunch, and I remember seeing, of course, it was you. You were wearing this cool leather jacket. You were wearing like Converse. I was like, that guy looks like he likes the Strokes, and I have to become friends with him. That's my mission, which you eventually did. And you played with on my KXB live
Yeah.
session,
Yeah,
which was
arguably
literally 2 months after we met.
was it really only 2 months
Yeah,
after
because
we met?
we met like in the end of like middle end of December, right before holiday break,
Yeah.
and then we played on February 15th of 2016,
That is
which
so
is
wild, man.
already been 5 years. Crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah, I mean, I remember, like I remember how quickly our friendship formed
Yeah.
after we basically met at work. It just was immediate, and in my adult life, I have had few, if any, other friendships that formed that quickly and that
Oh my gosh, yeah, you were
solidly.
just like it was just like, yeah, bromance right
I
right
know,
right away. Because I mean, it's just
truly.
first of all, you're obviously you're super friendly, and but then when I was like, you had your music background, and then we had the same taste in music, and I was like, no other person knows about, I don't know, like say the Future Heads or We Are
Right.
Scientists or whatever other band. Um, I was just yeah, it was very organic, and it was just like, okay, perfect. And then I remember I got a call from DJ Chili from KEXP from the El Sonido show, and he's like, "Hey man, I remember I told you I'd love to have you in for a studio session." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, and I told him like, I'm so honored by you telling me, but I'm not ready. Like, I haven't even played.
Yeah.
I don't even have a band." And I remember I forget who I was talking to. I think it was Ali, and then she was like, "Just like figure out, maybe just call some people that you know and make it happen. Like,
Yeah.
don't lose the opportunity." And then, and then I was like, "Okay, I know Keith. He plays the bass.
Yep.
I'm gonna see if I can get Michael Lerner to play the drums, which would be such an incredible honor and like just a
Michael
dream come
Lerner
true."
of
Michael
Telekinesis.
Lerner of Telekinesis,
Right.
exactly. Who recorded the drums for Centide, my first EP. And then I met you, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna ask Joel. Let's see if he's in it.
Well,
And then it
and what
happened.
what was amazing to me, I mean, because you gotta see it from where I was sitting, right? When we met, I don't think I had been in any bands, right? I was eventually in this band called The Breaks before I formed my own band
Yeah,
called
I
The
wanted to
Regret.
ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll put a pin in that. We talk about it. But I remember when we sat down, we started talking about all these commonalities that we had in our music taste. And then
Hmm.
you said, "Hey, I actually make music, and let me show you Sentir." Right. And you sent me this link, and I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh my God, man, this is actually good." Because that's a
Oh,
very
you're kind.
vulnerable moment when you meet someone and they
Yep.
send you music.
Yeah.
So they show you some art that they've created, but I
Right.
listened to it
Right.
and I was genuinely so blown away that I was like, immediately, if right, there's just so much admiration that I had
Oh
for
man.
you.
Same
So
same here.
I
Same
jumped at that
here.
chance.
And no, sharing music is also something that is not done with anybody. Like, you share music with someone that you know is going to put their attention to it and really listen. And when I met you, I was like, oh my gosh, I have someone to share my music with. And the beautiful thing about our friendship is that we've kept doing that over time. Like, when you were
Oh
working with
yeah,
the Regrets or with your solo stuff, sharing your stuff with me, I would be sharing my stuff with you. And we've had multiple sessions here at home in Seattle when we moved back here, listening to the new record,
yeah,
having you record parts, giving your feedback, your input. I think it's been just so important and so vital to have someone that you can rely on in that sense.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like you have someone who thinks just like you, but will be honest enough to give you the feedback that you need to hear,
Yeah.
as opposed to just having a friend who is into music and plays music and is like, yeah, it sounds cool, and that's it. Like, I love that you're very attentive and you're very good at giving feedback and being constructive with it,
Yeah.
and but also welcoming. Like, it's so nice to meet someone that I could be like, listen to all these 10 tracks, and then you listen to all those 10 tracks,
Oh, absolutely.
and
Yeah, and
it's
I feel lucky to have that as well, 'cause anytime I feel like I've got something sparking, a demo that is kind of getting ready, I mean, you're the first one that I send it to. I've had conversations like this with, with my girlfriend Callie, who
Mhm.
is professionally, an editor.
Right.
And we talk about the vulnerability associated with sharing your art with someone and the trust that you place in them. And then as the position of an editor, a confidant, a collaborator, what can you do to help that person realize the best version of their vision?
Right.
Um, yeah, it's a really special experience being able to collaborate musically. Okay, so you wanted to ask about
Well,
one or another way.
I wanted to ask
Yeah.
about the breaks, because I
Yeah.
know that from the breaks you transitioned out of that band and then eventually formed the Regrets,
Yeah.
which I can say I was the honorary first guitarist for the band.
You sure were.
Did a couple of practices, I
God, that's
auditioned,
great.
but
That's great.
yeah. But tell us about that, because I know that when you were playing with the breaks, there's also some changes with that band, and I know the singer, I think, eventually moved to Tacoma, and
Yeah.
but I think you were playing synths with that band, right? You
Yeah,
weren't
I
like
was I was playing
playing the
both
guitar,
synthesizer and guitar.
right?
Yeah, and, like, doing backup vocals and this stuff. Yeah, it was a very different experience. And he's down in LA now.
Oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
and actually, so in my time with the band, I was with this band for almost exactly a year. I wanna say it was, like, July or August
Hmm.
of 1 year to the following year. Um, and it was a Craigslist band. They had an ad,
Great,
they were looking for a guitarist, and they
right,
listed a lot of the same influences that you and I just listed.
right,
And I listened to the demos that this guy had put up, and I was like, I dig this."
yeah,
So I went in, and we were really mostly learning songs that he had primarily written, but he was open to a certain amount of collaboration on those tracks, which I appreciated.
hmm,
Uh I think I kind of softened the music up a little bit, which I
okay,
don't think he always liked. It was a very interesting, yeah, talk about an interesting collaborative, experience. So, ultimately, what had happened was we kept cycling through drummers. I think we went through, like, 3 or 4 different drummers in the year that I was there, uh, and we just, for various reasons, couldn't get anything to work and couldn't book a show, and we kept re-recording the same songs with kind of different personnel and different mixes and all this stuff. And then he
right,
moved to Tacoma, and I was like, I can't make that work in terms of practices. And so logistically it was done.
right.
Um it was a very interesting experience though.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then I think that's when we met, and then we played with Elia on
Yeah.
KXP,
Yeah.
and then we did a couple shows too. Remember, we did a show, one of my first
Oh,
shows
yeah.
while at Barboza. We did one of my first shows in at Nectar Lounge
Yeah,
in Fremont.
I remember after the breaks, but before the regrets.
Hmm.
I was playing with you on these Futuro Humano shows,
Yes.
as the bassist.
Yep. Yeah, that was really important to me. That
Yeah.
having your presence there, like, just you help me boost my confidence, and just feel like I have, you know, like, this is worthwhile. I got to do this,
Yeah.
and then that's what allowed me to later on do music more on a solo as a solo act elsewhere. But
Yeah.
um, I know that you later formed the Regrets, which is such a cool band. And I know that you guys released an EP. Um, what's I know it's been, what, has it been 2 or 3 years since
Yeah, it's been
last
2
show?
years. 2
Okay.
years since our last show.
And I know that since then you have been working or attempting to work on more solo stuff. What's
Yeah.
kind of the status with that? You've been able to make more
Um,
music. I know that you have a lot of ideas.
yeah, I've got a lot of ideas. Right now I feel a little bit like a centipede trying to describe its dance. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Where it's
right.
like I don't know if you've ever had this experience. There was a time where for me writing music, I was able to get totally out of my head and
Hmm.
just do stuff.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the harder it is for me to allow myself to put those first things down on paper.
Right.
So I start with chords and I say, no, I don't like these chords. Or I start with lyrics and I say, no, I don't like these lyrics. Or I start with a melody and I say, well, this really isn't anything there. And so I'm trying to get myself past that place of standing in my own way, right? Blocking my own
Right.
shot, all this stuff, just to the point of like, look, I've got a whole bunch of ideas and I would love to realize them. And literally anything is better than nothing. Um, so that's kind of where I am with it. And I'm trying to understand like, what do I want to make? It's to use a different experience. Um, One of the like heads of game at Nintendo, I want to say I think it was Shigeru Miyamoto, who was responsible for the F-Zero games, right? They're these outer space racing games. And he makes it, and then the fans are clamoring for another F-Zero game. And he says, "Look, what can I give you that I haven't already given you? Why do you want another F-Zero game? Because it's fundamentally the same thing." So for me, that's the other thing I struggle with is like it would be very easy for me to just write sort of the same garagey 4 chord uh rock song,
Right.
especially about the same lyrical stuff.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to figure out if that's actually meaningful to me and if it's something that excites me. Um
Well, it seems
s-
like you're questioning that, and also I think
yeah.
you're evolving. You're trying to do something that's different from that,
Yeah.
and I think that's also very very natural
Yeah.
and very much expected if that's something that.
Yeah.
But it's also not easy, right? Because there's something about making the music that you've always done that's always comforting
Yeah.
and easy and straightforward, and it's harder to do something that's outside of that scope, outside of your comfort scope.
How
Um, and
how do you Yeah, please.
so you're I think in a way challenging yourself to come up with something different. I think it's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't mean that we won't be able to listen to your music, because you're very very talented
Thank you.
and you make just really really great pop songs and ballads and just like really really great music. And I mean I love everything I always wanted to be part of the Regrets because of that specific reason,
Thanks, man.
because your music is very welcoming, and not just as a listener, but if you play it, it's just so much fun. It's so
Yeah.
exciting. Like it's like a dream job to be able to play Joel Izo's music. That's how I see it. And I know that it's been a while since you've released stuff or you shared
Yeah.
music with me. And I know that also at some point we talked about doing music together,
Yeah.
collectively. We even have a name for it. We even have an
Yeah.
Instagram account if anybody
I
wants to
know.
follow, to this non-existent band, but someday we'll have some music
Yeah, we're
called
s we're squatting on all the domains. We've got this. It's
Somos Amigos.
Somos Amigos.
There you go.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. It will happen.
I love that. Yeah.
I think I've gotta get to a place of, experimentation, I think. So, like,
Yeah.
if I can ask you,
Sure.
how do you in the creative process, right, how do you get past that space of, self-doubt, self-censorship? Is that something you deal with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think what's been very important for me is working with a producer
Uh-huh.
or working with a arranger, because that additional element that can be provided that I may be lacking
Yeah.
is what makes everything happen. So the really cool thing about working with Steven Aguilar has, even though I've worked with him in the past, the really cool thing about working with him again, and by the way, I love working again with producers and with friends that I've, like same thing happened with Diego Recalde, who's
Mhm.
also the first guest on my podcast show. We recorded my first EP called Complacency many years ago, 10 years ago, and then we recorded Futuro Mano. He was one of the co-producers. there's something just really neat about re-experiencing the chemistry that you had before, and there something really interesting happens when you work with someone that you respect and you admire again.
Yeah.
So there's something to say
Yeah.
about that. But then on the other hand, what I loved about working with him this time is that he he's a great director. He really tells me how to put the right sentiment when I'm singing a specific phrase or lyric. And there was also, I went through a lot of hard times in LA because was uh, I, I was unemployed for many months. I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do. We were expecting Luca. There's a lot
Yeah.
of pressure, and I remember that because we spoke pretty frequently about it.
Oh yeah.
But what was really beautiful about working with him is that he really lets you be who you are without really changing much. And a bit different thing that happened with the EP that we worked on. This one, a lot of like the stuff that I created with the demos, we've rescued and are using on the actual songs.
Really?
So that was a huge boost of confidence because it was like, oh wow, we don't really have to redo things again. We could just use what we have and then be resourceful and then just rearrange. And that's where he played a huge part, is because my way of maybe creating a song uh, might not be the most optimal way, in the
Mhm.
sense that maybe the structure is not the correct one, or the structure is not as best depicts the sentiment of the song.
Sure.
And so what he was really great at doing is like, he's like, how about we do this? How about we put the chorus here? How about you add another verse here? How about we do? And so building that and having that camaraderie and that chemistry and that guidance
Yeah.
was is crucial. So I think that in your case, if you're going through the same thing, maybe looking for someone that you can play with,
Yeah.
that can produce your music, so that they can also help with that. And that's been super super important for me, because if I didn't have the presence of a producer during my creative process and actually finishing songs,
Yeah.
my music would just be very like, I don't know, like ones and zeros, very robotic, like ding 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 ding.
Well,
And
okay, first of all, I mean, getting a collaborator, it sounds like it's time for Somos Amigos. But
yes.
uh, I gotta say, I mean, that is actually something I really admire about your music, is that the way that it plays with structure.
Oh, thanks.
That there is a lot of pop music, right? Coming from this long history of pop music, it
Hmm.
is really tied into verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, chorus.
Right.
Like, my songs, when I look at the stuff that I've written, a lot of it is
Hmm.
unintentionally very formulaic. And one of the things that I love about your music is the way that it feels much more influenced by artists of the 80s like New Order, where they could release a club edit, right? And the structure of the song lends itself to this incredible groove, beat, repetition, extension. Like, and I love that kind
Oh,
of it. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting mode of composition.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's also part of that evolution, because I've usually would work with musicians that would record the bass line, the drum line, the guitars, the solos, keys and all that stuff. And then eventually, because I moved out of Ecuador and I moved over here, and then it was just pretty much me, uh, there's something important about being resourceful with
Hmm.
what you have and the elements that you have in front of you, and how you can create something out of that and
Yeah.
make the best out of that. And sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes it's demanding and it's hard. But if you at least get the structure of a song in place and the idea, and again, I'm going to use the same phrase again, but the same word, the sentiment of what you want to get across.
Yeah.
Um, it's like a formula. Having that in place, plus someone that can guide you and produce your music and arrange your music,
Yeah.
equals a more optimal result
Yeah.
in the long term.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important because I know there's so many producers out there that are very talented that work fine by themselves and they do their own stuff by themselves, and I admire that so much, because I don't know, I would not be able to do something like that's my goal. At some point, I would love to record my own record
Yeah.
and produce my own record without having any external influence, just to see what happens. But I feel that what makes a record good is in my case being able to collaborate and being okay to receive that collaboration, meaning it's okay to take risks if that person thinks that they should take risks, that we should take risks for a song.
Yeah.
Like for example, one perfect example of that was when we released Vacío. So Vacío was the second single for my first EP, Sentir.
Yeah.
But then I re-recorded the same song again for Futuro Humano. But when I recorded the demo for Vacío, it's a very straightforward song, just guitars and blah blah blah. And then when I recorded with Steven at Earwig Studios, he added some effects and he added the space echo. I think I forget what it was, but and he had the drums and he's like, "Well, how about we do this?" And at first I was like, "Well, that's kind of going outside of my comfort zone. This is not how I sonically I had envisioned the song being."
Yeah.
And then I realized it's okay to take risks.
Yeah.
He's the expert. I'm like a Padawan. I might have like a, you know, like a specific vision in mind that I don't want to get distorted. But then sometimes if you have someone who comes in with a fresh mindset and a different outlook on how that song may be, and it sounds completely different, you have to hold back and be like, it's okay to let someone else direct or, you know, lead the ship, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I remember we went through something similar when we recorded Endless Desire, which is the
Right.
Regrets EP, right?
Right.
We recorded it with Dylan Wall, who did a phenomenal job.
Yep.
One of the songs was called Under a Sideways Moon, which is like one of my favorite songs that I've ever written.
Mm-hmm.
But we basically had two versions of it, and we referred to them as Under a Sideways Moon and Fast Moon
Right.
because one of them was just like it. The first version that I wrote was my attempt at writing Surfer Girl. And it was in 3/4, and it was so doo-woppy. I mean, it was just such a throwback. But
Right.
the band, one time in practice, they picked it up and played it like in 4/4 at basically double speed. And that was the version. So we showed both versions to Dylan, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we got to go with the fast one." It's like I have to trust that.
Right. Did you at first thought the contrary? You were like, this is not how it's going to go? Or were you like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess
At,
majority, it's a
at first,
democracy.
At first, I wanted to do this ballad version of it, but I like the fast version much better, and I think I'm glad that we did it that way.
Right. Have you listened to the other version
Oh, yeah, I go back and
again?
listen to my demos all the time, my
Yeah.
home
Your demos
demos.
are great, by the way.
Thank you.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
there's a
No,
certain
please.
character to them. I mean, I think every place and
Mhm.
every sort of recording setup has its own character, and everybody has their presets that they lean on, so, like, I listen to those, and it feels like covering myself in a warm blanket because it's all the sounds that I'm familiar with. But yeah,
Right. Yes. No, I was going to say that I remember very fondly when you came over to my place in West Seattle and you were already thinking about names. And we went to
yeah,
there was like a Subway that was close by. And we had a
yeah,
sandwich and we were talking about names. And because I think you had a prior to the Regrets, you had another name that you were actually using already
yeah. We
on
went by the
online.
button ups. We went by
The
the button
button
ups.
ups, right?
Yeah,
And then there were some other contending names.
yeah.
Uh, I remember that it was a really cool process. You had some options there.
What I remember was that you encouraged. There was another band out in New York, I think, that was no longer active,
Uh-huh.
but that was already called the Regrets. And I
Yes.
remember
Yes. Yeah.
you telling me, like, "Look, if you love this name, just use it."
Yeah. Yeah. That's ultimately how it goes, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's unless, you know, it means something bad in a different language.
right. Yeah. Which, as far as I can tell, this didn't.
Guano.
Oh. Well, that happened with, Pop Etcetera, right? They changed their name because it turned out to be, like, offensive UK slang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, no, I think when it comes to names, I mean, I'm a bit particular, but I don't want to overthink things.
Yeah.
And I feel that ultimately, whatever the name is, you know, your gut feeling, you just have to embrace it and go with it. And I think it was a great name, and I
Thank you.
love the artwork for the EP for
Thanks.
Endless Desire.
Yeah.
it would be very appropriate to someday have a proper jacket like that
Oh, yeah.
for the band.
We've gotten that a million times.
Yeah.
Someday, if and when the Regrets start playing again,
Mhm.
um, I would love to do a run of satin jackets.
Yeah.
Like, Phoenix, right? One of these bands that I have loved for
Yep.
my entire life. They did a run of satin jackets that said Phoenix on the
I
back with
remember
2
that.
rain
Yeah.
Oh, they were so cool, man.
So cool.
I would love like either a white satin jacket with red lining, satin jacket with white lining, and a big R on the back. It'd just
Yeah.
be cool as all get out.
So cool. So
Yeah.
cool. So do you have anything in mind for this year with your music? Like, do you have goals that you want to attain? Are you putting yourself, specific objectives musically? Do you want to release things, or are you just kind of still in that process of trying to figure out through experimentation, maybe other sounds and other?
I
Um,
I would love to hold myself to the idea that I'm gonna release something this year or have something kind of ready-ish. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I would love for that to be the case. Do you know what I mean?
I hear that.
Like,
Yeah.
I would love to have that dedication. I don't think I have it right now, but I think I might get it. Uh,
Good.
I do have a whole bunch of ideas cooking. I just wanna finish the demos that I have.
Good.
I wanna finish the verses for songs. I wanna find the chorus melodies. I basically just wanna I think it would be a sensible goal for me in the coming year to take the fragments that I have, because I have a lot of fragments, and turn them into something complete,
Hmm.
and, just get that ready, just so that if I wanna release it, I can. Right now, my creativity, honestly, is pushing to I've started writing film criticism.
Nice.
Um,
Where
yeah,
at?
so there's a local blog called Nada Mucho that has
Oh
published.
yeah, I know Nada
Yeah,
Mucho. Yeah.
yeah. So they've published. I did a review of an Ingmar Bergman
Oh
movie,
nice. That's
and
awesome.
I wrote a review of the Invisible Man and Kajillionaire, and I'm
Very
writing one
cool.
for Minari and a whole bunch of other
Is that
places.
something that's currently accessible for the public to?
At least the Ingmar Bergman review is
Okay.
out. If you go to nadamucho.com
Right.
and look at the movie reviews, you'll find one with my byline.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know that well, I guess the main guy is doing also a video um
Yeah,
podcast like on YouTube. I've seen a couple different videos that he's released. It's really cool. He's a
yeah,
really funny guy.
yeah. Well, yeah. So anyway, that's my hope. My hope is I would love to write some more music
That's
and
awesome.
put it down.
That's awesome. And I think you should definitely do that. And I have immense respect and admiration to your music, to your art. I
Thanks.
think you're a great, great singer songwriter. You have brilliant, clever ideas that I would never be able to come up with, and I just want to see more. I'm a big fan. And with that being said, and to kind of close the
Yeah.
session and the conversation, and before we go, how can people find your music?
Oh my gosh. We're up on every streaming service, Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer.
Right,
Deezer is big outside the United States,
it
apparently.
is. Yeah,
Yeah. So the Regrets. You're
right.
gonna find a couple, but our latest release is called Endless Desire. It's got a Letterman's jacket with a big R on it. You'll know it when you see it. And if you want to see all of the ghosts of my past, I have a personal SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Joel Azose, where you can look at all of the old covers that I've done and demos of things that ended up being regret songs and all this stuff.
Perfect.
Um, yeah.
That is awesome.
And of course,
Yeah,
you'll be able to hear some of my music on the new Elia release.
that's right.
Played guitar on one track.
Yes, that's right. On the last one called TBD.
Yeah.
That's literally how the song's titled.
What's
Um,
what's the latest with your release date? And then we can close
we
that.
don't have a specific release date. I think it's going to be sometime this year, but
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, yeah, the mixes should be done sometime by next month,
great.
and I'll be releasing probably another single, and then after that, we'll do the release of the record, and I'm looking
Incredible.
forward to that.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
I've already heard it, so I'd say I can't wait to hear it, but like I can't wait to hear it.
Oh,
I'm
you're too
excited to hear
kind.
all the new mixes, and I'm excited for the world to hear
Oh, thanks, man.
the new record.
I'm excited just to get it out because I also want to look forward to hopefully working with you again
Yeah.
with Somos Amigos and cooking some other music together. But no, I really appreciate having you here today. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely keep us posted with new music.
Yeah.
And again, thank you again for joining this afternoon. And to all our listeners, thank you, gracias, and remember, be kind. Peace.